Hi folks, welcome back. Thank you for watching. Please do hit subscribe if you haven't done so yet. It really does help when you do that. So today folks, I've got an absolutely astonishing tremolo pedal to show you. Now at the tail end of last year I made a video with this, the Phase-O-Matic Deluxe from Effectrode. And as you'll have hopefully seen in that video, this pedal's appearances are a little bit deceiving in that it's just a 4-knob phaser pedal. But once you get to know it and you learn all the hidden functionality, the amount of different phasing sounds in that pedal are almost infinite. You have two LFOs that you can set out of phase with each other with different waveforms, different levels of feedback, different rhythmic sequencing type effects for each LFO. You can go absolutely crazy getting to know that pedal and sculpting some amazing intricate phaser sounds. There is no phaser sound pretty much that pedal can't do. And the tremolo I've got for you today is much the same sort of deal, because this is another of Phil Taylor's amazing creations. This here is the Delta-Trem. Now again, we have just a 4-knob tremolo pedal. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk you through this pedal's kind of surface level functionality, and then we're going to take a much deeper dive into all the hidden features and really get it running to its true potential. So I'm going to turn it off, I'm going to turn the rhythm down and leave the other knobs straight up the middle. So I've got my Strat plugged straight into the Delta-Trem, and I'm using the pedal's dual outputs to split the signal into two different amplifiers. So I've got my JTM45 clone and my Hughes and Kettner Pure Tone, both Marshally type amps. I've got them set very clean and as close to each other as I can in terms of tone, for reasons I'll explain later on. So just the guitar split into the two amps sounds like this. Now, you'll probably hear that the guitar sounds pretty quiet in comparison to the voiceover of this video. Now, the reason for that is, as anyone who's ever spent any length of time with a tremolo pedal will tell you, when you kick a trem on, even if the volume is exactly the same as your clean sound, it quite often makes your guitar sound quieter, even though in peak RMS terms, that's not the case. And the reason for that is, of course, half your signal is being chopped away by the amplitude modulation, so there's just less signal there. So when you stand on the trem, very often it can feel like a loss of energy more than anything else compared to your clean signal. So Phil's thought of that, and the Delta-Trem has an inherent level boost in it. Now if you don't want this, you can dial it out using a trim pot on the circuit board, but I'm really enjoying it. So when I kick the pedal on, you'll notice the guitar volume comes up a little bit overall. So I'm going to leave the knob set pretty arbitrarily straight up the middle and off for the rhythm. I'll show you that later on, to show you what the core sound of this pedal is. So even before we've touched any of the knobs or delved into any of the hidden functionality, that is just probably the most inspiring musical sounding tremolo I've ever played. You have that level boost which you can take out if you want it, but as it comes from the factory, I don't want to say anything from Phil Taylor is factory, but as it ships, it has that boost in there, and as I said, I personally really like having it there. Now let's start with the depth knob. I'm going to turn that all the way down and you'll see the LEDs stop flashing. But being an Effectrode pedal, this is a tube-driven pedal, and you have these two 12AU7s here that control the left and the right. And now you can swap different tubes into this pedal. Higher gain tubes, something like a 12AX7, will make the pedal sound a bit more gainy. Rather than just a level boost, it will sound like a sort of low gain overdrive. So you can get creative and swap the tubes around if you want to. But by having the depth all the way off, you still have that tube circuitry in line, and you do have that level boost. So you don't have to use this pedal as a tremolo. You can use it as a tube preamp, a tube buffer to drop the impedance of your guitar signal way down to drive cables further down the line and retain your high end, and a tube splitter because, as I said, I'm using the dual outputs to run two different amplifiers. So you can turn the trem off and use this as just an amazing tube buffered preamp splitter. So I'll turn the pedal off and show you what effect it has bringing that tube circuitry in line. So even using your tremolo pedal not as a tremolo and just having it as a sort of tube boost and splitter and buffer, you have that clarity there because of the buffering effect. You have the boost, you have the harmonic richness of the tube circuitry. It is just absolutely magical. But let's turn the depth knob up a little bit and you'll see that the LEDs come back on. So the trem effect is now engaged. So what I'm going to do is just turn that up to show you how deep the effect can go. It's very subtle down the bottom and kind of on off up the top. So all the way from off and acting as a tube boost, all the way up to on-off tremolo. As you would expect, that knob is very self-explanatory. Another knob that's very self-explanatory is the speed knob here. Now all the way up you see the LEDs flash at the speed the tremolo is going at, so it can go very fast all the way down to incredibly slow. Now if you imagine the slowest tremolo you've ever heard, this pedal can go a few more rungs down that ladder. So much so that with the speed turned all the way down, it takes a good few minutes for it to complete its cycle. So you can have it modulate like just once through an entire song. Now I'm not going to demo that today just because I want to keep this video shorter than 4 hours long, but I'll start it about there so you can see it's going pretty slow. It's about as slow as you would ever find a tremolo in any amplifier. And I'm just going to turn that up to show you how slow and fast it can go. So, as you would expect, super fast up the top, incredibly slow low down, and you can then go further to the point where it takes minutes to complete its cycle. So all the speed you could ever want in a tremolo pedal is there. Now, the shape knob works in conjunction with this little switch on the top here, which is marked filament, fluid, and neon. Now, this knob controls the waveform shape that the LFO works with. So you can go on in filament mode from anything like a sort of standard square, triangle, sine wave type tremolo. In fluid mode, you get more kind of saw asymmetrical shapes, and in neon mode, a more kind of throbby effect. And this is designed to emulate different amp tremolos from history. Now, I'm no expert on tremolo circuits, but you've got the sort of the Valco type trem in there, the sort of fluid mechanical tremolo, the Fender square wave, Vox triangle wave, all that sort of stuff is in there. So again, I can't show you every single waveform in here because we'll be here for hours and hours, but I'm just going to cycle through the shape knob and flick the switch to show you the sort of things that is in there. So the filament mode are where your kind of classic trem pedal type sounds are, but there's lots and lots of different variations in there to emulate classic circuits. So you can dial this in to sound very close to almost any tremolo effect from history. Now the final knob here is the rhythm knob, and with that turned all the way down, the tremolo is as kind of any other trem circuit would be. It's very regular and very repetitive. So I'll try and show you with my hand what it's doing here, but it's just very regular. But as you turn the rhythm knob up, it starts to kind of miss beats out and make it more rhythmic, which is a really cool effect, and it's really nice to have that on because it's a little bit unpredictable in terms of a trem pedal kicking it on. Where's it going to go? What's it going to do? So I'll try and show you with my hand again what it's doing, but you should be able to hear it for yourself too. So it takes a very regular effect and just makes it that little bit more interesting. And it's a really cool thing to kind of layer into a song because it's just an added tier of complexity that your ears aren't drawn to straight away, but the harder you listen, you start to pick out these really sort of intricate details. So it's a really fun effect, that. Now, it does have a couple of other bits of functionality that are so-called surface level. You have a control voltage input, and that controls the speed knob. So that's where you use an expression pedal, and you push the pedal forward and it increases the speed. So you can do those kind of speed swells. I don't have an expression pedal here to show you, but I'll try and do it manually. You can do this sort of effect. So you can control it on the fly, and you can also have it so you can set it fast for one song, slow for the next, or use it more creatively and ride it for sort of a moving effect. But that is one thing you can do. And also to control the speed, you have this external tempo function here. And this works with like MIDI switches. So if you are playing a gig where the show is run to a click track with a backing track, for example, and you hit your MIDI controller and it configures your other pedals to map it to a certain tempo, you can map this to the tempo too and have it absolutely locked in to the tempo of the song if that doesn't move from one night to the next. Now, I don't have any MIDI functionality here, but that's another way you can control the speed of the tremolo. And finally, the last way to control the speed is the tap tempo switch. So very self-explanatory. The speed you tap that button is the speed that the tremolo runs at. It's kind of as simple as that. So if you're playing live, whatever tempo the drummer decides to start the song in, which as we know can vary, you can then adjust the pedal to lock in with the song. And another really cool bit of functionality is if you tap it more than once, you're tapping in the tempo. But if you find that the tempo is right, but it's just starting to go out of sync with the band, you can tap the button once and it returns it to the beginning of its cycle and locks it back in with the band. So a great bit of functionality for gigging guitarists there. And once you're in tap tempo mode, if you touch the speed knob, that is now controlling it. So you're out of tap tempo mode and the speed is dictated by the position of the knob. So that's the kind of basic surface level functionality covered. And I think this pedal is worth the price of admission alone in terms of those sounds, because they are absolutely incredible. But as I said at the start of the video, there is a whole different world inside this pedal that we're now going to explore. So we're going to start to look at some stereo functionality. Until now, you've been hearing the pedal running in mono, and both the amps receiving exactly the same signals, a kind of a dual mono setup, and the two mics on the amps summed into mono in Pro Tools. So that's what that sounds like. A mono signal, both amps receiving the same thing. But I'm now going to pan the JTM45 hard left and the Hughes and Kettner hard right. So the same thing but with the mics panned out is this. So it'll sound a little bit weird, especially in headphones, having a different amp on, you know, hard left and right. But as I said at the start, I've tried to make the amps sound as close to each other as I can to make this work to its greatest effect. So the first thing to look at here is this mono stereo switch on the top, and this actually controls the input of the pedal. Now in mono mode, it's dealing with a mono jack, just like you'd have with any, or pretty much any electric guitar. So it takes the input, it affects it, and it puts the exact same input out of both outputs. But in stereo mode, you'll hear that one of the outputs goes completely dead. So So the right output has gone. Now, why is that? That's because the input is now acting as a stereo jack, a TRS input. So if you have, for example, a keyboard with a left and a right output, you can then sum that into a TRS jack and put it into this pedal and have both sides affected independently of each other. So even though it's only got one input jack, it doesn't have to be mono in, stereo out. It can be stereo in and stereo out. So if you want to use it with keys, or I suppose an old like Gibson ES355 with the stereo jack arrangement, you can do that with this pedal. But for now, we're just going to leave it in mono because that's what we're dealing with a guitar. Now, when it comes to controlling the left and right sides of this pedal, there are essentially two different setups we can have, and it all relates to the internal jumper connection and whether that's in place or taken out. So at the moment, it's in place as the pedal ships from Phil. And with that in place, holding down the tap sync switch controls the right hand side, but we're not controlling shape, depth and speed. We're kind of just adding in some subtle glitching, some sort of wow and flutter tape-like effects for a different kind of stereo effect. So let's have a little look what that sounds like. If we hold down the tap sync switch, we're now controlling the right, so we can turn up the kind of wow and flutter type effects there, and then set the pedal back to exactly where it was and see what difference that we have between right and left. So it is almost like a broken tape machine, isn't it? It's just like something snagging on that right hand side. So it's a very, very cool type effect. But where this sort of stereo functionality really comes into its own is if we remove that internal jumper connection. So this is where the fun really begins then, because we can now have left and right doing entirely different things. So let's set the right hand side to a fast tremolo that's very deep and with that waveform, whatever it is. And then we can set the left side to be slower, less deep, and with that waveform, whatever it is. And they both work entirely independently. So just by taking that little internal jumper out, you can make it go absolutely haywire and have the left side totally different to the right with different rhythms and different waveform shapes, different speeds, different depths. I just have one side bouncing off against the other, and it is really, really cool, especially when you record it and have it sort of hard left and right and a track, kind of like you heard today. And it just adds a sort of ear candy to everything just from playing a guitar into a tremolo pedal. So there is so much the Delta-Trem can do, and it can, just like the Phase-O-Matic, be exactly what you want it to be. If you just want a sine wave tremolo with a slight level boost and a lovely sort of warm tubey throb to it, it can do that. If you just want to use it to split your signal and buffer it in a really nice kind of warm tubey way, it can do that. If you want left and right going nuts and separately from each other and really creating some very intense, intricate guitar parts in a dense track, it can do that. So you can set it to do whatever you want it to do. And it is just the most magical, inspiring trem I've ever played. Personally, I actually prefer the more simple sounds in it, but I am totally going to be playing around with those nut sounds when it comes to building up some sort of dense tracks. I can't wait to experiment with it in that sense. But please do let me know what you think, folks. As I said, we haven't covered absolutely everything this pedal can do, because otherwise this video will be days long. But if you have this pedal, let me know what you think in the comment sections. If you just want to comment on everything you heard today and the functionality you saw, please do comment as well. I love getting your thoughts, opinions in the comment sections. But for now, folks, thank you ever so much for watching. I hope this video was interesting for you. Please do carry on subscribing, and I'm now going to go away and play this pedal a whole lot more because I am addicted to it at the moment. So thank you, folks, and I will see you very, very soon. Bye-bye.